The weight of those keys in my palm felt heavier than any dumbbell I'd ever lifted, but in the best possible way. They weren't just metal. They were years of early mornings, late nights, and saying no to things I desperately wanted. My name is Moren, and for the last 5 years, every extra shift at the design firm, every skipped vacation, every no thanks I'm saving, had led to this moment. This beautiful, sun-drenched 2-bedroom apartment, bought and paid for, a gift for my parents, Sophie and Michael. It's perfect, Maureen, Mom whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, the genuine happy kind that make your own throat tighten. Dad just stood there, looking around the spacious living room, a slow smile spreading across his face. He wasn't a man of many words, but his expression said everything. I wanted you to have somewhere peaceful, I said, my voice a little shaky. Somewhere you could really relax and enjoy your retirement. The apartment wasn't a palace, but it was a world away from their cramped, aging rental. This place had an open-plan kitchen with gleaming new appliances. I could already picture Mom humming as she baked, something she hadn't done in years because their old oven was so unreliable. The living area opened onto a small balcony, big enough for a couple of chairs and a table, overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street. You can have your morning coffee out here, Dad, I'd said, pointing. He'd just nodded, eyes still taking it all in. I'd pored over every detail. The paint colors, warm neutrals, the flooring, easy-to-clean laminate that looked like real wood. I'd even picked out most of the new furniture, spending weeks comparing swatches and measuring dimensions. The sofa was my pride and joy. A soft, dove-grey sectional, deep enough to sink into but with good back support for Dad. I'd even splurged on the stain-resistant fabric, imagining future grandkids, maybe a spilled cup of tea. Oh, sweetie, you shouldn't have, Mom said, finally finding her voice, though it was thick with emotion. She pulled me into a hug, one of those tight, enveloping hugs that smelled faintly of her rose-scented hand cream. We don't deserve this. You're too good to us. Nonsense, I said, hugging her back. You deserve every bit of it. You've both worked so hard your whole lives. And they had. Dad had been a mechanic, Mom a part-time school secretary. They'd always made sure I had what I needed, even if it meant they went without. This was my way of giving back. Dad finally spoke, clearing his throat. Your mother's right, kiddo. This is something else. A real fresh start for us. He put an arm around Mom's shoulders. We can finally get rid of that lumpy old bed. I laughed. I already ordered you a new one. Memory foam. It's being delivered next week. Mom's eyes widened. Maureen, honestly. But she was beaming. Of course, there was always the Mitchell factor. My younger brother. Mom always said, family helps family, Maureen. Usually when Mitchell was in another spot of bother. He was, as Mom put it, perpetually unlucky. While I was meticulously saving and planning, Mitchell was, well, Mitchell was Mitchell, drifting from one short-lived job to another, always full of big ideas that never quite materialized, always needing a bit of a loan, a place to crash, a sympathetic ear. He just needs a little more time to find his footing, sweetie, Mom would say, her voice soft and pleading whenever I'd gently suggest Mitchell might need to take a bit more responsibility for himself. Dad would just nod, muttering something about boys needing to sow their wild oats, even though Mitchell was well past oat-sowing age. I loved my brother, I did, but his version of finding himself usually involved him finding my parents' wallet, And Mitchell will be so pleased for us, too, Mom added then, her eyes sparkling. He's always wanted us to have a nice place. He can come for Sunday dinners. I managed a smile. Right. Well, this is for you two, for your peace and quiet. I'd made sure the lease agreement was solely in my name, the ownership documents too. It was my asset, for their use. A safety net I controlled. They moved in at the start of spring. I helped them unpack the essentials, set up the kitchen, arrange the bedroom. They seemed so happy, so content. Mom kept fussing over the little herb pots I'd bought for the kitchen windowsill. Dad actually assembled the small bookshelf for his history collection without a single grumble. I gave them a few months to settle, get everything arranged just so. We spoke on the phone every few days. Mom would tell me about the friendly neighbours, how Dad was enjoying his walks in the nearby park. It all sounded idyllic, exactly what I'd hoped for. I pictured them having their morning coffee on that little balcony, maybe inviting their old friends over, proud as punch. I couldn't wait to surprise them with a visit, see them enjoying that new couch I'd spent weeks picking out. If only I'd known who was really enjoying it. The faint, persistent smell hit me even before I reached their door. It was a strange mix, like stale cigarettes and old takeout. I frowned. Mom and Dad didn't smoke, and Mom was a meticulous housekeeper, even in their old, run-down place. The hallway carpet near their unit, number 3B, looked grubby, darker than the rest. My stomach gave a little lurch of unease. I had my own key, of course. I'd planned to just let myself in, shout, "Surprise!" and watch their faces light up. Now, I hesitated. Taking a deep breath, I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The door swung inward, and the smell intensified, a wave of stale air, unwashed laundry, and something else. Something vaguely like a damp dog, though they didn't have one. My eyes struggled to adjust from the bright hallway to the dim interior. The blinds were drawn tight. Then I saw it. Or rather, him. Sprawled across my beautiful, dove-grey, stain-resistant sectional was Mitchell, fast asleep, mouth agape, one arm flung over his head. Empty beer cans littered the coffee table I'd so carefully chosen. Ashtrays, overflowed with cigarette butts. Takeout containers were stacked precariously on the side tables, some with dried food still clinging to them. The whole place, my pristine gift, looked like a frat house after a week-long bender. My jaw literally dropped. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The surprise I'd planned morphed into a sickening shock that punched all the air from my lungs. Footsteps shuffled from the direction of the master bedroom. Mom appeared, her hair disheveled, a bathrobe pulled hastily around her. She saw me, then her eyes darted to Mitchell, then back to me. A flush crept up her neck. "Maureen? Oh, you're here!" Dad emerged behind her, looking equally flustered, his eyes avoiding mine. He just shuffled his feet, his hands stuffed deep into his dressing-gown pockets. What is this?" I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. My gaze swept around the trashed living room, the grime, the sheer disrespect. Mom wrung her hands. "Now, sweetie, don't get upset. It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I repeated, my voice gaining volume. "It looks like my brother has turned this brand-new apartment into a pigsty. What is he doing here?" "He just needed a place to land on his feet, sweetie," Sophie said, her voice taking on that familiar, wheedling tone she used whenever Mitchell was involved. "He deserves a break. Things have been tough for him." My father, Michael, finally mumbled, "He's family, Maureen." Mitchell stirred on the couch, woken by our voices. He blinked, stretched, and then his eyes focused on me. A slow, lazy smirk spread across his face. "Oh, hey, sis," he said, his voice gravelly from sleep. "You gonna order pizza? I'm starving." The audacity stole my breath. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator I'd picked out for its energy efficiency. My beautiful, peaceful apartment. My gift. My sacrifice. Trashed. And there they were, my parents, making excuses, and my brother demanding food. "Pizza?" I echoed, my voice dangerously quiet. "You think I'm here to order you pizza, Mitchell?" He shrugged, pushing himself up slightly, wincing as if the effort was too much. "Well, you usually do when you visit, and I could really go for a meat lovers." Mom rushed forward. "Maureen, please, let's not make a scene. Mitchell's he's been going through a lot." "A lot of what?" I snapped, my gaze fixed on my brother. "A lot of my sofa? A lot of my clean air, which he's now filled with smoke?" I pointed to an overflowing ashtray. "You don't even smoke, Mom. Dad, you quit years ago." Dad just looked down at his slippers. Mom twisted the belt of her bathrobe. "He's trying to quit," she offered weakly. "It's stressful for him." "Stressful?" I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up. "You want to talk about stressful? How about working 60-hour weeks for 5 years to buy this place? How about skipping my own damn vacation so you two could have a nice retirement?" My voice was rising, and I didn't care. "And you let him do this? How long has he been here?" There was a beat of silence. Mom looked at Dad, who suddenly found a spot on the wall intensely interesting. "Well," I pressed. He moved in with us, sweetie," Mom finally admitted, her voice small. "Moved in with you? You mean from day one? The day I gave you the keys, he was already planning to squat here." The betrayal was a physical blow, winding me. All those tearful thank yous, all those promises of enjoying their peaceful new home. Had it all been a lie? Mitchell, meanwhile, had the gall to look bored. He picked at a loose thread on the sofa arm. "Look, it's no big deal. It's a big apartment, plenty of room." "It's not about the room, Mitchell," I shouted. "It's about respect. It's about the fact that this was a gift for Mom and Dad, not a crash pad for you." "Oh, here we go," Mitchell muttered, rolling his eyes. "Miss High and Mighty. Always got to have it her way. My way?" I stared at him, incredulous. "My way was to provide a clean, safe, beautiful home for our parents. What's your way, Mitchell? Turning it into a garbage dump?" "They said it was fine," he shot back, finally showing some animation. "They said you wouldn't mind." I turned to my parents. "You told him I wouldn't mind? You seriously thought I'd be okay with this?" Mom started to cry. We didn't want to upset him, Maureen. He was so down on his luck. And it's true. We thought, well, you've always been so generous. Generous, not a doormat. The words ripped out of me. I felt sick. They hadn't just allowed this. They'd enabled it, probably even encouraged him. The thought made bile rise in my throat. "Now, Maureen, that's not fair," Mom started, her voice trembling. "We were just trying to keep the peace. Mitchell gets so agitated." "Agitated?" I scoffed. "So to prevent Mitchell from getting agitated, you sacrifice my gift, my trust, my sanity?" I gestured around the room. "Look at this place. It stinks. There are burn marks on the side table I bought you." I pointed to a small, blackened circle on the new end table next to the sofa. Mitchell finally swung his legs off the couch, planting his feet firmly on the floor. "Oh, boo-hoo! A little burn mark. It's called living, Maureen. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of counting your pennies." "My pennies bought this roof over your head, you ungrateful slob!" I shot back, my hands clenched into fists. All right, that's enough," Dad finally boomed, stepping forward slightly. It was the most animated I'd seen him. "There's no need for this kind of talk. We're family." "Family doesn't treat family like this, Dad," I cried, turning to him. "How could you let this happen? You saw what this place looked like when I handed you the keys. How could you stand by and watch him destroy it?" He looked away, his face troubled. He's had a rough time, Maureen. Lost his job again." "There's always a reason, isn't there?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And I'm always the solution. My money, my resources, my goodwill. When does it end?" "It's just temporary," Mom insisted, clutching at my arm. I pulled away. "He just needed a safe place until he gets back on his feet. He promised to keep it tidy." I let out a harsh laugh. "Tidy? Mom, are you blind? This place is a biohazard. How long has he actually been here? And don't lie to me." Mom glanced at Dad, then down at her hands. "Well, he came with us when we moved in, just to help unpack, you know. And he just never left." I pressed, my voice dangerously low. "He didn't have anywhere else to go, sweetie," she whispered. "His landlord. There was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated flatly. "So, for 3 months, he's been living here, rent-free, turning this beautiful apartment into his personal dumping ground, and you've been lying to me every time we spoke on the phone, telling me how peaceful it was, how much you were enjoying it?" The silence was my answer. The weight of their deception settled over me, heavy and suffocating. I felt like I was in some surreal nightmare, the kind where you scream but no sound comes out. We were going to tell you," Dad mumbled. "We were just waiting for the right time." "The right time?" I asked, my voice hollow. "When would that have been? When he'd pawned the new TV for beer money?" Mitchell bristled. "Hey, I wouldn't do that!" "Wouldn't you?" I challenged, looking him dead in the eye. His gaze faltered for a second. Mom stepped between us. "Look, Maureen, we're all a bit overwrought. Why don't your father and I pop out for a bit? Get some air. Give you some space to process. We can talk properly when we get back." "Get some air," I said. "Or run away so you don't have to face the mess you've created." "It's not like that, dear," she said, her voice placating. "We just think it's best. We'll grab some groceries too, for dinner." She couldn't even look at me. Dad was already inching towards the door. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "Go. I do need some space." Space to figure out what the hell I was going to do. They practically fled. Mom gave Mitchell a worried look as they left, and he just shrugged, already reaching for another beer from a crumpled 6-pack carrier on the floor. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving me alone with my parasitic brother and the ruins of my generosity. Mitchell cracked open the beer. "So, you gonna calm down now, or what?" I ignored him. I needed to see the extent of the damage. I walked towards the spare bedroom, the one I'd envisioned as a guest room, or maybe a little study for Dad. My old hope chest was in there, tucked into the closet. I'd brought it over from my place, thinking it would be safe. It held sentimental things, childhood treasures, my grandmother's costume jewelry, Nothing of huge monetary value to anyone but me, but priceless in terms of memories. The spare bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. More squalor. Clothes strewn everywhere. An unmade bed that looked like it hadn't seen clean sheets in weeks. And there, in the corner, was my hope chest. The lid was slightly askew. My heart sank. I rushed over to it. The old brass latch, the one I always had to jiggle just so, was broken. Forced. My breath caught in my throat. I lifted the lid. It was ransacked. My carefully packed treasures were tossed about, some items clearly missing. My collection of miniature porcelain animals I'd saved up for as a child, half of them gone. The silk scarves my grandmother had brought back from her travels. A few were still there, but the most vibrant ones, the ones I loved, were absent. And then I saw it. The velvet box that had held her favorite necklace and earrings, a beautiful, intricate set of silver and amber, was empty. My blood ran cold. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was theft. He hadn't just invaded my parents' home. He'd plundered my memories. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a small, overflowing wastepaper basket beside the desk. Amongst the crumpled tissues and food wrappers, a corner of a printed slip caught my eye. I reached in, pulling it out. It was a pawn shop receipt, dated 2 weeks ago, and there, clear as day, under customer name, was Mitchell. The listed items were vague: assorted jewelry, collectible figures. My stomach churned. I stood there, the flimsy piece of paper trembling in my hand. The trashed apartment was one thing. The lies, the enabling, the sheer audacity, that was another. But this was a declaration of war. They thought I was their doormat, their endless well of forgiveness and financial support. They were about to find out I was the goddamn landlord. Clutching the pawn ticket, I walked back into the living room. Mitchell was channel surfing, his feet propped up on the stained coffee table, completely oblivious. The sight of him, so comfortable amidst the chaos he'd created, so smug in his entitlement, made my blood boil. "Get your feet off the table, Mitchell," I said, my voice dangerously calm. He glanced up, surprised by my tone. He actually hesitated for a second before slowly lowering his feet. "What's got your knickers in a twist now?" I held up the pawn ticket. This is what?" He squinted at it. "What is that? A grocery list?" "It's a receipt from a pawn shop, Mitchell, with your name on it, for assorted jewelry and collectible figures." I let the words hang in the air. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, then he quickly schooled his features into an expression of nonchalance. "So, maybe I sold some of my own stuff. A man's gotta eat. Your own stuff?" I repeated, my voice like ice. "Like my grandmother's silver and amber necklace? Like the porcelain animals I've had since I was 10? Were those your stuff, Mitchell?" He scoffed, but there was a flicker of something, fear, in his eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. I wouldn't touch your precious junk. Then what jewelry, Mitchell? What figures?" I advanced on him, holding the receipt out. "Because these items look suspiciously like the ones missing from my hope chest, the hope chest you broke into." "I didn't break into anything," he blustered, getting to his feet. "The latch was already loose. I was looking for a blanket." "A blanket?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You were looking for a blanket, and you just happened to stumble upon my most cherished possessions and decide they'd look better at a pawn shop." "Look, I don't know what you're talking about," he said, turning away, trying to dismiss me. You're just trying to cause trouble. Oh, I'm causing trouble! I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. You invade this apartment, turn it into a cesspit, steal from me, and I'm the one causing trouble? His face hardened. They're just things, Maureen. You've got plenty of money. You can buy more. It's not like it was real gold or anything. The casual dismissal of my sentimental belongings, the utter lack of remorse, was like a punch to the gut. It's not about the money, you idiot, I seethed. It's about the principle. It's about the fact that you are a thief and a parasite. Hey, he shouted, his face reddening. Don't call me that. What should I call you then? A guest? An entrepreneur liquidating assets? Just then, the key turned in the lock, and Mom and Dad walked in, their arms laden with grocery bags. They stopped short, sensing the supercharged atmosphere. What's going on? Mom asked, her eyes darting between me and Mitchell. Are you two fighting? Fighting doesn't quite cover it, Mom, I said, not taking my eyes off Mitchell. Your son, the one you've been coddling and making excuses for, is a thief. He broke into my hope chest and pawned my grandmother's jewelry. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad's face went pale. Mitchell, is this true? Mitchell avoided their gaze. She's exaggerating. It was just some old trinkets. I needed the cash. You needed the cash? Dad repeated, his voice low and dangerous. So you stole from your sister? It wasn't stealing! Mitchell insisted, his voice rising in desperation. I was going to pay her back. It's not like she doesn't have money to spare. She's always flashing it around, with her fancy apartment for you guys, her designer clothes. Flashing it around? I was incredulous. I worked for every single penny, Mitchell. Something you wouldn't understand. Oh, here we go again, St. Maureen the martyr. He sneered. Enough! Dad roared, and this time there was real force behind it. Mitchell actually flinched. You will tell us exactly what you took, Mitchell, and you will get it back. Now! Mom was crying softly, sinking onto the edge of the sofa. The clean edge, I noted with a grim satisfaction. Oh, Mitchell, how could you? After everything Maureen's done for us. For you. She's always holding it over our heads. Mitchell whined, reverting to his petulant child persona. It's not fair. I have bad luck. You don't have bad luck, Mitchell, I said, my voice weary but firm. You make bad choices, and this time there are going to be consequences. My parents looked at me, their faces a mixture of fear and dawning realization. The pawn ticket was still in my hand. This wasn't just about a trashed apartment anymore. This was about a fundamental breach of trust, a pattern of disrespect and entitlement that had finally crossed a line I couldn't ignore. I want you out, Mitchell, I said, the words falling like stones into the silence. Out of this apartment, today. What? He yelped. Mom gasped again. You heard me. Pack your things. Whatever you haven't already pawned, that is. Maureen, sweetie, you can't mean that, Mom pleaded, rushing to my side. Where will he go? He has nowhere. That's not my problem anymore, Mom, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He's an adult. He can figure it out. Or, maybe, I added, looking pointedly at them. His enabling parents can sort something out for him. Just not here. Not in my property. Dad looked torn. Maureen, he's your brother. And he stole from me, Dad. He disrespected my gift to you. He lied, Mom and Dad lied. This whole situation is unacceptable. I took a deep breath. The anger was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but something else was forming alongside it. A steely resolve. They thought I was their doormat. They were about to find out I was the goddamn landlord. And the eviction process was about to begin. "You can't just kick me out," Mitchell blustered, his face flushed. "I have rights." "Rights?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "What rights? The right to live rent-free in an apartment I own, trashing it and stealing my belongings? I don't think so." I turned to my parents. "He leaves today, or I start formal eviction proceedings against all of you." Mom's face crumpled. "Maureen, please, don't do this to us. We'll talk to him. He'll apologize. He'll get the things back, won't you, Mitchell?" She looked pleadingly at him. Mitchell just scowled, arms crossed. "She's overreacting." "Overreacting?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "I come to visit the peaceful retirement home I bought for my parents, and I find a squatter, a trashed apartment, and my stolen heirlooms. And I'm overreacting?" I shook my head. "No, I'm done. I need some air." I grabbed my purse. "I'm going for a walk. When I get back, I expect him to be gone. If he's not, I'm calling a lawyer." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me with a satisfying finality. The fresh air outside, even the city-tinged breeze, felt like a relief after the stale, smoky atmosphere of the apartment. My hands were shaking. The first person I called was Claire. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up? You sound weird." "Weird doesn't even begin to cover it," I said, and then the whole sordid story came tumbling out. The trashed apartment, Mitchell, the lies, the pawned heirlooms. Claire listened patiently, interjecting with horrified gasps and indignant exclamations. "No, he didn't. Oh, Maureen, that's awful. Your grandmother's necklace, that absolute scumbag. Tell me about it," I said, my voice tight. "And my parents just enable him. They were making excuses for him, Claire, even after I found the pawn ticket." "Unbelievable," Claire fumed. "They're just as bad, letting him get away with it." "So, what are you going to do? You can't let this slide." "I told them he has to leave today, or I'm starting eviction proceedings." "Good," Claire said emphatically. "Stick to your guns, Maureen. They've taken advantage of your generosity for far too long. This is your property. You call the shots." "I know," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. "It's just hard. They're my family." "Family that treats you like an ATM and a doormat isn't family. It's a liability," Claire said bluntly. "You deserve better. You worked your butt off for that place." Her words solidified my resolve. She was right. I'd been the responsible one, the reliable one, for so long that they'd forgotten I had limits. They'd forgotten I had teeth. After hanging up with Claire, my next call was to a lawyer specializing in property law. I explained the situation briefly, that I owned the apartment outright, that my parents were living there with my permission, but that an unauthorized occupant, my brother, was causing significant problems, including property damage and theft. The lawyer, Ms. Evans, was brisk and efficient. "Since the apartment is solely in your name, and there's no formal lease agreement with your parents, they are essentially tenants at will, as is your brother, by extension of their permission, however ill-advised. You have the right to revoke that permission and ask them to vacate, provided you give them proper notice according to state law. 30 days is standard." 30 days, I echoed. Even with the damage and theft, you could potentially expedite it based on nuisance grounds, but it can get complicated, she explained. A straightforward notice to vacate is cleaner. However, if your primary goal is to remove your brother immediately, you could inform your parents that their continued residency is conditional upon his immediate departure. If they refuse, then you issue the formal notice to all occupants. That sounded like a plan. But a darker, more satisfying idea was already beginning to form in my mind. Why just evict them? Why not remove the problem entirely? My next call was to Mr. Quinn, a realtor Claire had recommended a while back when I'd idly considered investment properties. He had a reputation for being discreet and getting things done quickly. "Mr. Quinn," I began, after introducing myself, "I have a somewhat unusual situation. I own an apartment, and I need to sell it. Fast. And preferably without the current occupants knowing it's on the market until it's absolutely necessary." He listened patiently as I gave him a carefully edited version of events, focusing on my need for a quick, quiet sale. He didn't pry, just asked practical questions about the apartment's size, location, and condition. I glossed over the current condition, focusing on its features when new. "I understand the need for discretion, Moren," he said, his voice calm and professional. "Cash offers are usually quickest. Are you prepared to be flexible on price for a speedy, no-fuss transaction?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. The money was secondary to the principle at this point. Just as I was finishing my call with Mr. Quinn, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text popped up. "Maureen, please call me. We need to talk. Mitchell is very upset." I almost laughed. Mitchell was upset? Good. A few hours later, after I'd cooled down slightly and fortified myself with coffee and a plan, my parents called again. This time I answered. "Maureen, thank goodness," Mom said, her voice strained. Have you calmed down a bit, dear?" "I'm perfectly calm, Mom," I replied, my tone even. Good, because Mitchell is really sorry. He didn't mean any harm. He's just not thinking. Not thinking when he stole from me? Not thinking when he trashed my property? He's promised to get your things back from the pawn shop," Dad interjected. "He just needs a little money to redeem them." I closed my eyes. The audacity. "So you want me to give him money so he can retrieve the items he stole from me?" "Well, when you put it like that," Mom faltered. "And sweetie, while I have you, we're a bit short on groceries. With Mitchell here, food goes so much faster. Could you perhaps send a little something over for him?" For us, the request, so casually inserted, so utterly tone-deaf to the inferno of my anger, was like a splash of gasoline on a raging fire. My determination, which had been hardening all afternoon, now solidified into pure, unadulterated steel. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice dangerously sweet. "I have a few things to arrange first." Just as I hung up, my phone rang again. It was Mr. Quinn. "Maureen?" he said, his voice businesslike, but with an undertone of excitement. "I think I have a cash buyer, very keen. They're investors looking for a quick purchase in that area. They want to see it tomorrow. Can you arrange access without alerting the current occupants to the reason for the viewing?" A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Mr. Quinn," I said, "I think I can arrange that perfectly." "Mom," I said, my voice carefully neutral when I called her back the next morning, "I need to arrange for an appraiser to come by the apartment today, for insurance purposes." An appraiser? Mom sounded flustered. Today? Oh, Maureen, the place is... well, it's not at its best. I'm aware, Mom, I said dryly. Just tell Mitchell to make himself scarce for an hour or so, and maybe try to clear some of the debris from the living room. The appraiser needs to see the layout, the fixtures. Oh, all right, dear, if you think it's necessary. She still sounded hesitant. Will this cost a lot? It's already covered, Mom, I lied smoothly. Just be there to let them in around 2 o'clock, okay? The stress of the deception was immense. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be one of them, questioning me, or worse, Mitchell having a tantrum. But then, another text would come through from Mitchell himself. Yo, sis, still waiting on that pizza money, and maybe a bit extra for my troubles? Or a wheedling voicemail from Mom. Maureen, darling, Mitchell's really trying, but he's so disheartened. A little encouragement from you would mean the world. Each entitled demand, each manipulative plea, just refueled my resolve. They were digging their own graves, one text message at a time. Mr. Quinn arrived with the prospective buyers, a quiet, professional-looking couple named Spencer, right on time. I met them in the lobby, having instructed my parents to simply open the door and then stay out of the way. The current occupants are a little disorganized, I'd warned Mr. Quinn. He'd just smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, Maureen. I've seen it all. We'll focus on the bones of the place. And he was a master. As we walked through the apartment, which, to my surprise, was marginally tidier than the day before, though still grim, Mr. Quinn expertly steered the Spencers' attention to the spacious layout, the modern fittings, those that weren't obscured by clutter, and the balcony's view. He spoke of potential and a blank canvas, deftly glossing over the overflowing ashtrays and the faint, lingering smell of stale beer. Mrs. Spencer wrinkled her nose once or twice, but Mr. Quinn, with a charming anecdote about a previous fixer-upper that turned into a gold mine, quickly smoothed things over. Mitchell, thankfully, was nowhere to be seen. Mom and Dad hovered awkwardly in the kitchen doorway, looking anxious. I avoided their eyes. The viewing was over in less than 30 minutes. They seem very interested, Mr. Quinn murmured to me as we rode the elevator down. They're looking for a quick close. I'll be in touch. I felt a knot of tension begin to unwind. It was actually happening. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mom, her voice tight with panic. Maureen, your father. He's had a funny turn. He's feeling dizzy. His heart is racing. It's all this stress, Maureen. This business with the apartment with Mitchell. It's too much for him. My blood ran cold. What? Is he okay? Have you called a doctor? He won't let me, she wailed. He says it's just the worry. Maureen, you have to stop this. Whatever silly ideas you have about making Mitchell leave or anything else, it's going to kill your father. Guilt, sharp and sickening, clawed at me. Was I really doing this? Was my anger worth my father's health? I almost caved. I almost said, okay, Mom, forget it. It's fine. But then Claire's voice echoed in my head. Family that treats you like an ATM and a doormat isn't family. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. If Dad is really unwell, you need to call an ambulance. Now, I'll meet you at the hospital. No, it's not. It's not that bad. She backtracked quickly. He just needs to rest, and he needs you to be reasonable. The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost insulting, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I spent a restless night, replaying her words. The next morning, I called my Aunt Carol, Dad's sister. She's the family gossip, but sometimes that's useful. After some general chit-chat, I casually asked how Dad was doing. "Michael?" Aunt Carol said, surprised. "He's fine, as far as I know. Saw him at the golf club yesterday morning with Bill Henderson. Said he was playing a great round. Why?" "Is something wrong?" Golfing. Yesterday morning. While Mom was telling me he was on the verge of a heart attack from the stress I was causing. The cold fury returned, tenfold. Later that day, Mom called again, her voice laced with a new kind of desperation. "Maureen, there's something you need to understand. Something we should have told you a long time ago." I waited, my jaw tight. "Years ago," she began, her voice trembling. Before you were doing so well, Mitchell got into some trouble. He took out a very big loan for one of his business ideas. Your father and we co-signed for him." I felt a familiar sinking feeling. "And let me guess, the business failed, and he defaulted." "Yes," she whispered. We lost our old house, Maureen, the little bungalow. We had to sell it to cover the debt. We've been renting ever since, struggling to make ends meet. That's why this apartment meant so much to us. It was security. And we're terrified of Mitchell failing again, of him ending up on the streets because we have nothing left to bail him out with. We're financially vulnerable, sweetie." Her voice cracked. We hoped. You understood that you owe us this security. After all we've done for you." The implication hung heavy in the air. "You owe us. You owe Mitchell. Your success is our safety net." The sheer, breathtaking entitlement of it almost made me laugh. They'd gambled their security on Mitchell, lost, and now expected me to pick up the pieces indefinitely, to sacrifice my own future for their past mistakes and his continued failures. Any lingering guilt I might have felt vanished, replaced by a chilling clarity. They weren't just enabling Mitchell. They were financially dependent on my continued generosity, a generosity they clearly felt entitled to. Just then, my other line beeped. It was Mr. Quinn. I quickly ended the call with Mom. "Maureen," Mr. Quinn said, "the Spencers have made an offer. It's a cash deal, a quick close, exactly what you wanted. It's a little below your initial asking to reflect the, lived-in condition and their willingness to take it as is, but it's a strong offer. More than enough, I'd say." I didn't even hesitate. "I accept." "Excellent," he said. "I'll draw up the paperwork immediately." The ink on their offer wasn't even dry, and I was already drafting a very different kind of letter for my family. The next few days passed in a blur of emails, scanned documents, and brief professional calls with Mr. Quinn. The Spencers were indeed keen on a quick close. They'd waived most contingencies, eager to get their hands on the property. I signed the sales agreement in Mr. Quinn's quiet, tasteful office, the pen feeling surprisingly steady in my hand. There was no elation, just a cold, hard sense of purpose. "It should all be finalized within the week," Mr. Quinn said, shaking my hand. "The funds will be transferred once the title clears." I nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn, for your efficiency and discretion." "My pleasure, Maureen," he said with a small, understanding smile. With the sale irrevocably in motion, a strange calm descended over me. It wasn't peace, not exactly. It was more like the eerie stillness before a hurricane. I spent my evenings meticulously preparing. I printed a copy of the signed sales contract, redacting the Spencers' names and the sale price for now. Then, using the template Ms. Evans, the lawyer, had provided, I drafted a formal 30-day notice to vacate, addressed to Sophie, Michael, and all other occupants. It was concise, legally sound, and utterly impersonal. My parents and Mitchell, meanwhile, continued their lives in blissful ignorance. Mom called daily, her tone oscillating between overly cheerful, "Mitchell actually tidied his room today, dear. I think he's really turning a corner," and subtly guilt-tripping. "Your father's still not quite himself, Maureen. He worries so about the future." I kept my responses brief and non-committal. "That's nice, Mom." "I'm sure he'll be fine." Mitchell, emboldened by my lack of immediate retribution after the pawnshop discovery, which I now realized they'd probably interpreted as me backing down, had ramped up his usual demands. He sent me a text message with a link to a new gaming console. "Figured you'd want to get a head start on my birthday shopping. This one's sick. Make sure you get the extra controller." My birthday was 6 months away. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement was breathtaking. It was almost comical, if it wasn't so infuriating. Each text, each call, was another nail in their coffin. I didn't bother trying to get my grandmother's jewelry back from the pawn shop. It felt tainted now, a symbol of their betrayal. The Spencers could deal with whatever Mitchell had left behind. My focus was singular, getting them out. Claire was my rock during this period. "Are you sure you're okay?" she'd ask, her voice laced with concern. "You sound different." "I'm fine," I'd reply, and in a strange way, I was. I was operating on a kind of cold fury, a detached determination that felt almost out of body. "I'm just getting things done." "You're a warrior," she said one evening after I'd told her the sale was official. "They messed with the wrong woman." A faint smile touched my lips. They really did. I decided to deliver the news in person. A letter, an email, a phone call. It all felt too impersonal, too cowardly. They deserved to see my face when their world came crashing down. I called Mom. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice bright, almost cheerful. "I was thinking of coming over tomorrow afternoon. Maybe we can all sit down and have a proper chat, discuss how to move forward with everything." "Oh, Maureen, that would be wonderful!" Mom exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "Yes, please do. We can have tea. Mitchell will be here. We can finally clear the air." She clearly thought I was coming to forgive and forget, to sweep everything under the rug and resume my role as their endlessly patient benefactor. "Great," I said. "I'll see you around 3. The next day, I dressed carefully, choosing a sharp, professional outfit. I put the signed sales contract and the notice to vacate into a crisp manila envelope. As I drove towards the apartment, their apartment, for a few more precious hours, my heart pounded a steady, rhythmic beat against my ribs. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. The kind of anticipation you feel before a final exam you've studied relentlessly for, or before crossing a finish line after a grueling race. I parked my car a block away, taking a few deep breaths. This was it. The culmination of years of frustration, of being taken for granted, of quiet sacrifices met with blatant disrespect. There was no turning back now. Walking up the path to the building, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching myself in a movie. The hallway still had that faint, grubby look near their door. I wondered if the Spencers would replace the carpet. I stood outside my apartment door, the manila envelope clutched tightly in my hand. My heart was still pounding, a steady rhythm of impending justice. I could hear faint sounds from within, the muffled blare of a television, Mitchell's occasional loud laugh. They had no idea what was coming. "Showtime," I whispered to myself, and knocked. The door opened, and Mom stood there, a hopeful, slightly nervous smile on her face. "Maureen? Come in, dear, come in. We've just put the kettle on." The apartment looked... well, it still looked like Mitchell lived there. Perhaps marginally less like a hazardous waste site than my last visit, but the underlying grime and clutter were still oppressively present. Mitchell was, predictably, sprawled on the sofa, flicking through channels with the remote, a half-eaten bag of chips balanced on his chest. Dad was sitting in his armchair, looking up with a tentative expression. The air was thick with their expectant, slightly wary curiosity. They clearly anticipated a lecture, perhaps some tears from me, followed by a reluctant reconciliation. "So," Sophie began, bustling towards the kitchen. "Have you decided to be reasonable, dear? About Mitchell staying on for a bit?" I walked calmly to the center of the room, the manila envelope feeling heavy in my hand. "I have indeed made a decision, Mom," I said, my voice clear and steady. Mitchell grunted from the sofa, not even bothering to look up. "About time. Hope it involves back pay for all the stress you've caused." I ignored him. I looked from Mom to Dad, then back to Mom. "I've decided that this situation is untenable." I reached into the envelope and pulled out 2 documents. I handed one to Mom. "This is a copy of the signed sales contract for this apartment." Her smile faltered. She took the papers, her brow furrowed in confusion. Dad leaned forward, peering over her shoulder. Mitchell finally muted the TV, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Sales contract?" Mom murmured, her eyes scanning the first page. What does this mean, Maureen?" "It means I've sold the apartment," I stated plainly. The words dropped into the room like a bomb. Mom's hand flew to her chest, the papers fluttering from her grasp. Dad just stared, his mouth falling open. Mitchell shot upright on the sofa. "Sold it?" Mom gasped, her face draining of color. But why? This is our home." "No, Mom," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "This was my property, which I generously allowed you to live in. A property you and Mitchell have systematically disrespected and damaged." I then handed the second document to Dad, who took it with a trembling hand. "And this is a formal 30-day notice to vacate for all occupants." 30 days? Dad stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief as he read the notice. You're kicking us out?" Mitchell exploded. "You can't do that! This is harassment! I have rights! We'll sue you!" He jumped off the sofa, his face contorted with rage. "Sue me for what, Mitchell?" I asked, my voice like ice. "For selling my own property, for evicting tenants who have violated every conceivable term of goodwill. Go ahead, try it. I have an excellent lawyer." "But where will we go?" Mom whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "We have nowhere to go, Maureen. You know our situation." "Yes, I do," I said, my gaze unwavering. "I know you enabled your son to turn my gift into a pigsty. I know you lied to me for months. I know you stood by while he disrespected not just the apartment, but me and my hard work." I then turned to Mitchell. "And you. You're not just lazy and entitled, Mitchell. You're a thief. You stole from me sentimental items, things that meant the world to me, and you pawned them for a pittance without a second thought. They were just old trinkets, he snarled. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Nothing? I repeated, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to remain calm. My grandmother's necklace was nothing. The figurines I'd cherished since childhood were nothing. The trust I had in my own family. Was that nothing, too? Dad finally found his voice, though it was weak. Maureen, please. We're family. Families make mistakes. We can fix this. Mitchell will apologize properly. He'll get your things back. It's too late for apologies, Dad, I said. The sale is final. The new owners will be taking possession in 30 days. You bitch! Mitchell suddenly screamed, his face purpling. You always lorded it over us. Always thought you were so much better than everyone. Mitchell! Mom cried, shocked. But he was on a roll, his fury completely unmasked. It's not my fault you're so uptight. Mom and Dad said you'd be fine with it, that you owed them. They even said I should ask you for an allowance once I was settled. The words hung in the air, damning and absolute. Mom looked horrified, her face ashen. Dad stared at Mitchell, his expression a mixture of shock and utter defeat. Mitchell, realizing what he'd just blurted out in his rage, clapped a hand over his mouth. But it was too late. The final piece of their deception had clicked into place. They hadn't just tolerated his behavior, they'd actively encouraged it, planned it, felt entitled to it. Sophie started to sob, great, gulping sounds. Oh, Mitchell, no. So, you see, I said, my voice surprisingly gentle despite the turmoil inside me. This wasn't just Mitchell's doing, this was a group effort. Mitchell, cornered and exposed, seemed to snap. His eyes narrowed, and he took a menacing step towards me, his fists clenching. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just ruin our lives and walk away? He lunged forward slightly, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, meeting his furious gaze with one of cold, hard resolve. Years of suppressed anger, of quiet resentment, had forged an armor around me. He wasn't going to intimidate me. Not anymore. He stopped, perhaps surprised by my lack of fear. He was breathing heavily, his face inches from mine. The smell of stale cigarettes and unbrushed teeth wafted from him. You'll regret this! He finally spat, his voice hoarse. We'll all regret this. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Mitchell, I said, my voice like ice. Only you will, and Mom, and Dad. You'll regret pushing me to this point, but I won't regret taking back my life and my peace of mind. The 30 days that followed were a masterclass in passive aggression and outright hostility. My phone became a battlefield. Mom would call, weeping, pleading with me to reconsider, to think of your father's health, to remember all the good times. Then, an hour later, Dad would leave a stiff, resentful voicemail about my lack of compassion and how I was tearing the family apart. Mitchell, true to form, sent a barrage of abusive texts filled with threats and insults, each one more unhinged than the last. I refused to engage. My communication was solely through formal channels, mostly emails facilitated by Mr. Quinn regarding move-out inspections and key handover. Claire was my lifeline, talking me down from moments of doubt, reminding me why I was doing this. They made their bed, Maureen, she'd say firmly. Now they have to lie in it, or in this case, get out of it, through Aunt Carol, who called under the guise of just checking in, but was clearly fishing for details. I heard they were scrambling. Apparently, Finding a decent, affordable rental on such short notice, especially with their financial history and Mitchell in tow, was proving difficult. Aunt Carol mentioned something about a tiny, run-down 2-bedroom above a noisy takeaway shop they were considering. The image brought a grim flicker of satisfaction. On the 30th day, I arrived at the apartment with Mr. Quinn for the final walk-through. The Spencers, the new owners, were scheduled to arrive an hour later to receive the keys. The apartment door was ajar. Inside it was mostly empty, but the filth remained. They'd taken their furniture, what little of it wasn't mine, but had left behind overflowing trash bags, stained carpets, and a general air of neglect. Scuff marks scarred the walls where furniture had been dragged. The beautiful, dove-grey sofa I'd picked with such care had a fresh cigarette burn on one arm and a dark, unidentifiable stain on a cushion. They hadn't even bothered to sweep. Mitchell was the last one out. He carried a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his face a mask of sullen hatred. He brushed past me without a word, deliberately bumping my shoulder. I didn't react. Mom and Dad followed, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and resentment. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad gave me a single, hard look, then turned away. They didn't say goodbye. They just shuffled out, their shoulders slumped, the architects of their own downfall. As their car pulled away from the curb, a profound silence settled in the apartment. Mr. Quinn cleared his throat. "Well," he said, looking around, "it'll need a good deep clean." "I've already arranged it," I said. "They're coming this afternoon." I'd send my parents the bill, of course, not because I expected them to pay it, but for the principle of the thing. After the Spencers arrived, all smiles and excitement about their new investment, and the keys were formally handed over, I walked away from that building for the last time. The money from the sale was already in my account. A strange mix of emotions washed over me. There was the bitter satisfaction of justice served. Yes. They had pushed, and I had pushed back. Harder. But beneath it, there was a profound sadness for the family I thought I had. The family I had tried so hard to care for, only to be met with entitlement and betrayal. Overriding it all, though, was a huge, unexpected wave of relief. Liberation. I had my finances back under my control. My peace of mind, which had been slowly eroding for years, was returning. My future was my own again, unburdened by their expectations and Mitchell's endless needs. Karma, I reflected, was a funny thing. They had taken my generosity, my kindness, my financial stability for granted, assuming it was an infinite resource for them to exploit. Now, they had nothing from me. The safety net was gone. The relationship with my parents and brother was irrevocably broken. But as I drove away, heading towards Claire's place for a celebratory and much-needed glass of wine, I realized it hadn't been broken by the sale of an apartment. It had been broken long before that, by years of enabling, by a fundamental lack of respect, by the slow, insidious creep of entitlement. I was finally free. The revenge had been messy, painful, and emotionally draining. But standing on my own, looking towards a future I alone would shape, I knew it had been absolutely necessary. Perhaps I'd buy myself a small condo, just for me. A true sanctuary, built on my own terms, for my own peace. No uninvited guests allowed.